I had just got off watch. I was a orderly for Admiral Kidd. I was a Marine, a private in the Marine Corps. And I was up forward getting clean because I had liberty that day on Sunday. I was going ashore. 7:55. I was forward there, and I felt like that on the side of the ship, some thumping, thinking that it was a water barge that used to come and give us fresh water every day when you're in port. And not so. Bombs were dropping on Ford Island. Ford Island is a little island in the middle of Pearl Harbor that they land planes on. Ford Island. They were bombing that. Then our general quarters sounded. I went to my general quarters station. And my general quarters station, if you look at that picture, there's two masts on the ship. I'm on my general quarters station is up there, 85 feet up in the air.
He's up in here.
On a gun director.
Pass it on down if you.
I had to climb up the ladder to get there. When I'm going up that ladder, you look over your shoulder, and here's about 8 torpedo planes coming in, because all the battleships were in a row. The torpedo planes were dropping torpedoes. And then as they dropped the torpedo, then they had to go past these rows of battle wagons that had things sticking up in the air over 100 feet. So they had to get elevation fast. During that period of increasing their speed and elevation, they were machine gunning us. I'm on that ladder going up when paint would chip off that leg. The legs on that tripod is this big around, and ladders are welded to it. And that's how we get to my battle station, which is 85 feet in the air. That was the things that went through my mind. Should I take another step forward? Should I stay where I am? Should I go back one step? When you see this chip paint, and that's machine gun bullets hitting this here big boat. And I gradually went on up. Then I looked down, and there's a bomb goes through the deck. I moved my body on the ladder around, so here's the round leg, like that, so I couldn't see that hole. And within 3 or 5 seconds, that exploded. And a lot of debris come up from that. It had dropped into officers' country, and a lot of steel and stuff. My lieutenant in the Marine Corps was 2 men ahead of me on this ladder. He didn't have the protection that I did, because when this blew up, all the shrapnel and everything come by me. I'm like this, and he was killed instantly. He's got shrapnel things on him. And I seen a man killed in World War II 5 minutes after it started.
Now, did you anticipate the shrapnel, and that's why you moved? Is that
definitely? Yeah, I knew. When I seen that bomb go down, as long as I see that hole, there's going to be an explosion within 4 or 5 seconds. So that's why I hid my body over from that leg of that tripod mast. And I couldn't see the hole, then I knew that I was safe.
You didn't get any shrapnel at all then?
None at all. None at all.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
So good Lord was right with him that day.
Well, the Lord was taking care of me all that time and through the war too. I'm up there, and about 10 minutes after this death that I seen, a big bomb, we'd taken a couple small bombs, but a big bomb was dropped between the 2 masts. 2 masts sticking up and dropped in there. That followed the path down the elevator shaft where the ammunition comes up. They have elevators where they bring up the big ammunition for the 14-inch shell, the 14-inch guns that we had. And with a delayed fuse and an armor-piercing nose on that bomb,
You know what?
it went down about 5 decks and then exploded in our ammunition, our gasoline, our fuel tanks. There was over 1 million pounds of high explosives, of 14-inch shells, thousands of bags of powder and everything, and that bomb searched that out and in the delayed fuse, and it all blew at one time.
You say it went down an elevator shaft?
An elevator shaft that we bring tanks up. We
It just happened to be, did it go through it?
Well, it has to penetrate some.
Yeah.
There's 2 or 3 things that it had to
And it was
penetrate.
dropped with enough speed that it was able to penetrate the...
An armor-piercing nose. And
That's what
anyway,
I find amazing. It's just a bomb that could
it was
clear
just
all-
lucky that it.
Well, yeah, lucky it hit
Yeah.
that was the worst bomb this yet.
Yeah, could have been worse. Well, see, that's why it does.
Down in that ship was more than 1 million tons of high explosives. And it all blew at one time. The upward thrust. I'm up there at the top. I'm up in that picture there. I'm up there standing, looking forward. And before the explosion of the upward thrust and everything, I could see the ship open like a flower was blooming, and then all this debris started going up, steel, men, arms and legs, and it was an awful sight to see. And that upward thrust was so great that I couldn't stand there too long. My knees buckled, and we went down. And there was eight of us in that director control up there. And we ended up in a human ball, hanging on to each other. Then the upward thrust was the greatest. Then it started doing this. And I'm up there 85 feet, thinking it's going to break. And the fire had started by that time. Then we finally stood up and looked down, and all we seen was just fire all over, oil that thick, all the way around the ship, burning. And how we going to? My thoughts in those days, yet today, will I ever see my mother again? That's the first thing I thought about. Will I ever see my mother again? And how am I going to get out of here? And we had a major in there with us. His name was Alan Shapley, a graduate of Naval University, Naval place in D.C. And that's where we get most of our Marine Corps officers come from the Navy Academy. We don't have a thing like the Army has, West Point, or the Navy. They picked Navy graduates to be Marine officers. He was a graduate there. He was a quarterback of the 1926 football team that was all Navy, and they played in the Rose Bowl and got beat by the University of Washington. Enrolled in 1926 team. His name again was Alan Shapley. So after the war and everything, when I got married, we decided that our first child would be named Alan. And we named our child after that general who at the time helped save our life up there by calming us down. He'd keep saying, remember what you learned in boot camp. Remember what you learned in sea school. Don't panic. Because I've seen many people panic on there that were probably slightly injured too. And so we finally decided then to come down. And one man, we got near one of those turrets, and he jumped maybe 15 feet. He thought he could beat the rest of us. So anyway, he broke an ankle, and he survived. But that was the only man that actually panicked in of the 8 men that came down with me. Now, of the units in that ship, during that explosion, 1,177 men were killed. And we had 88 Marines on there, and 15 of us survived. Of the Navy, there was about 335 that survived. But of that group, of that Navy group, the majority of that 335 were ashore, overnight Liberty. Some of them was the captain's gig, some of them's on the admiral's barge, and some of them's in school, some of them is in other places where we had churches on in different ships, some of them were at church. So actually it was only about 125 that were actually aboard that, plus those 15 Marines survived. The rest of them weren't even on the ship at the time, but they're still survivors. So we get down on the quarterdeck. Here I see my first sergeant on the quarterdeck. He wasn't on one of the stations.
What is a quarterdeck?
A quarterdeck is the main deck of above water that you get on a ladder to go on a ship, or
main deck,
or hold RUSS, formations and things like that on a quarterdeck. More of the teakwood deck. And so I get around there and seen my first sergeant, and he didn't have hardly any clothes on. He had been in the ship a little ways and was burned real bad, and he could recognize me, and when that officer said, "Oh, you have to swim for it, Ford Island's over there, not far, but you couldn't swim that way because it's all fire." So the breeze was coming safe from back this way, so we jumped in the water, under the oil, under the fire, and swam towards the place where the wind was coming. As soon as I come up one time in the oil and had to make the famous swirl and take a breath of air and then get back down. And when we got to the surface where there wasn't any oil, then we turned and went to Fort Island. This major is there talking to us all the time. We're swimming. He's given us information how to become stay alive by not panicking. And he talked to us all the way in. About halfway in, a man, one of our Marines, was Earl Nightingale, a very famous man later after the war. He was on this battle station where I was, corporal in the Marine Corps, college graduate, and he started pooping out on swimming. He was getting weaker and weaker. The major goes over under him and raises up and made him hang on to the back of his shirt, and he piggybacked the rest of the way to the beach and saved Earl Nightingale's life.
How long a time was you swimming? How long did it take you to swim this distance? How long did it take you to swim from the time you got in the water until you got to the island?
I would say pretty near a half hour, but we wasn't that far because bombs were dropping. The bombs that dropped near us, it would move the meat on your body. You'd think that you're going to lose the muscles on your legs.
There's also the water line that you stopped at.
And that the water main. The water. We went as far as a water main that was furnishing water to Fort Island from the main Pearl Harbor part, and we rested there. And I'm rested up pretty well. Some of the men knew that there was a bomb shelter on Fort Island, and I didn't know that. They took off in another direction, and I took off the shortest way to Fort Island. and I landed in the front yards of Navy quarters. There was the grass, and I walked up to the back door and knocked on the door, and no one answered. So I tried to knock, and it was open, so I walked in the kitchen. I remember looking to my left, there was the kitchen stove. It had oatmeal on it, and it was a gas stove. I remember turning the stove off and moving the oatmeal off the side. Those people in there had already gone to the bomb shelter. So then I went out the front door, and I was right near the Navy runways for the plane on Fort Island. And there was a Marine sergeant there, and he said, there'll be a bus come by here, and you can go over to the headquarters. So that I did. I went to the headquarters of the Navy on, it'd be all air, people with planes than this. And then when there would be people with pads, scratch pads, getting your name. We didn't have any dog tags on. Most of the clothes was on the real bad danger people, injured, clothes burned off. And we'd give our name and where we're from, what ship we're on, and they'd write it down. And then you go a little farther, and there'd be another officer there taking names.
Now, is the attack still going on?
Pardon?
Is the attack still
The
going on?
attack's still going on.
So you were knocked out of the game at that point, right?
Pardon?
You were knocked out of it. There wasn't any way for you personally as a sailor to fight back at that point.
I was a Marine.
Oh, right. I mean, as a Marine. That's great. Okay. But there wasn't any way for you to actually participate in the fight at that point. Because your ship was gone.
The ship was gone. I didn't have any weapons. And there was plenty of machine guns and everything going.
Okay.
But we're talking about 300 and some planes attacked us there in Pearl in different ways. And they just dropping bombs all over the place. Then I get to the area when some of the officers says we've got a morgue set up in a mess hall that would hold probably 400 people in the mess hall. We had men on the floor, we had men on the benches, we had men on the tables. And they wanted us to go up and down those aisles in that kitchen and into the galley part where the mess tables were, to see if we could recognize anybody. And I could just see the doctors going up and down, and the corpsmen going up and down. They'd look at this man for a few seconds and just walk on. They knew that he wasn't going to live very long. And they tried to find somebody that they could save.
Help.
And I didn't recognize a person, not one person. I can see why I didn't recognize any, because 1,177 of our men is already killed.
Right.
And then they put me to work on machine guns.